Welcome back, class. We're on I guess, the third segment, and we're going to talk about general influences uh, on work behavior. And there's a psychologist, again, academic out there that, Kurt Lewin, and he's, I guess, supposedly the founder of social psychology, which I don't do a lot in that, I guess, area or that discipline, but he's developed a formula that says behavior an employee for the most part is a function of P and E. Behavior is a so that really distills down. If you've ever had to work with functional relationships, it's B equals little f parentheses capital P comma E close parentheses, and it's a function of the person and their environment. And they get into you know they talk about the baby boomers. And so, baby boomers are, anybody born between 46 and 64. Generation X, born between 1965 and, 1979. Millennials, 1980 to 94. Generation Z, 1995 to 2012. Then they drop back and they talk about the traditionalists, born from 1928 to 1945, and there's still some of those individuals in the workplace, and they kind of overlap with that silent generation. So it was like 27 to 45. So to me, the traditionalists and the silent generation, they are they're just. I think it's different terminology for the same age group, and managing the team I had at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Buffalo, I had some of these individuals on that team that were traditionalists, that were in the silent generation. And as the authors point out in the text, each of these age categories, or each of these categories, or I guess examples of age ranges of workers, have different sets of values, motivations, preferences. When I first started at HealthNet, I was trying to manage a group in that Generation X, and I thought they were a pain in the behind to manage. But as I've moved on through kind of the management, experience over the years, it seems like each one of these categories, at least from my perspective, almost seems like they're harder and harder to manage. Millennials, I've managed millennials before, and that bunch, even at Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you would be there, and I'd have individuals come in and said, with the resignation letter, and I'm talking to them. We're talking about why they changed. And I had one young lady came in. She said, I'm, taking a job at another health plan, in the area. I said, well, why are you leaving? And she said, oh, they offered me a lot more money. I said, they did. I said, I thought Blue Cross Blue Shield paid a fairly competitive rate. She said, yeah, I'm getting a $5,000 bonus. Okay, $5,000 bonus, 52 weeks, talking about $100 a week. By the time taxes, Social Security, Medicare, I said, did you stop to think about how much disposable income you're going to get? Said, let's say you get $50 disposable income, and you're getting paid, bi-weekly, so there's 26 pay periods, and so then I'm, financially whacking it. She said, yeah. She said, that's a lot of money. It's like, I don't know. You couldn't reason with them, and now you hear Generation X. I mean, it's in the news, on the internet constantly, about Generation X, and they don't want to work, and you see these, TikTokers and Facebookers, and all of these types of social media talking about, oh my God, I had to work like 6 hours today. I said, yeah, I don't have time to see my friends. I can't go to the gym. I don't get enough sleep. It's the workforce is getting more and more difficult to manage. And I personally, I'm working as a consultant now, so I'm not really managing people. I manage teams of individuals when I go into a corporation to work. But I'm just thankful that I'm probably on the downhill slide of my management activities because I'm just concerned about the workforce and the work ethic of the current individuals out there trying that you have to manage as if you decide to go through the management aspect of any corporation or anywhere you work. So and then they kind of go through the baby boomers, generation born between, as I said, 1946, 64, corresponding with a population boom following the end of World War II. Makes sense, baby boomers. Face time is an important contribution to a successful work environment. They like to be in the office. When it came to, the virtual reality and the virtual aspect that, drove everybody was driven to by COVID. They were the group that was somewhat upset because they didn't like working from home. They wanted to be in the office. They liked that social aspect of being in the office. And again, they really like the face-to-face time. They want to be included in office activities, and value recognition is important. To me, I'm an economist. Show me the money. I'm not concerned about a pat on the back. I'm not concerned about the plaque that the baby boomers really like that kind of stuff. I like free lunch, as well as anybody at work, but I don't know, that seemed to be more of a concern for them than thinking about bonuses and pay raises. It was just a different group. And then you kind of move to Generation X, and generation born between 1965 and 1980. The X symbolizes the unknown nature of this generation. They prize flexibility in their jobs and don't like to be micromanaged. But they're also in it, what's in it for me kind of individual or kind of workforce attitude. Then you've got the millennials, largest share of the U.S. workforce, highlighted by positive attributes such as the ability to embrace terminology or technology. And I think that's true. They are the workforce category that is more likely to embrace new technology, prizes job and life satisfaction, make workplace enjoyable. So this is the group that likes that, work and lifestyle balance, associated with helicopter parents, don't necessarily like competition. They are kind of the trophy kids. And you see this a lot about when they're talking about, participation trophies and trophy kids, and they steer away from competition. And then you get into Generation Z, and it's born late 1990s to the 2000s, grown up fully engaged in technology, probably have a cell phone or an iPad growing at the end of their arm. They're the kind of homeland generation, cultural trends. They like naturalism and localism, and they had more hands-on parents. And it's I don't know. It's they look at work as financial and social, and they know there's no, I don't know. It's, to me, Generation Z, especially those that you hear on social media, to me, it just raises some concerns on what's the workforce going to be over the next few years. And any of you that want to move into management, leadership, strategic management, these types of, executives and corporations, I personally don't envy you, given the way that the workforce model appears to be moving. Then we talk that the authors talk for a few minutes about rational decision making. Why do CEOs make bad, unethical, or questionable decisions that drive poor company performance. Methods, and they question the methods used in making these decisions. The rational decision-making model, it's got 8, I guess, stages, factors, kind of a decision tree, maybe. And I've gone through this on multiple occasions, working for health plans, and I've never called it the rational decision-making model, but you're still going through these similar steps. You identify the problem, you establish what your decision criteria are going to be, you weigh the decision criteria, you generate alternatives, you evaluate the alternatives, you choose the best alternatives, you implement the decision, and then you evaluate the decision. Strategic decisions may not be obvious for these CEOs or board of directors or senior managers or senior leadership of a company. They assume options are clear and the best solution exists, and that doesn't always work. There's no, time or cost constraints, which is absolutely a fallacy. And the accurate information is available. They're making decisions. I mean, these are, even though they may go through these 8 steps or these 8 phases, they are making these 4 assumptions that I don't know. I think that's what drives decisions made by executives and companies today that drive organizations to poor performance. One of the things that I've always done, and especially Blue Cross Blue Shield, the individual I reported to, liked options. And we'd have a problem. I would map out probably 4 or 5 options, go in to sit down, and I would explain each one of them to him, and we'd talk about them. And him being an actuary and I'm an economist, we were both driven by the numbers and driven by probabilities and outcomes. And so let's say I had 4 options, and I would provide here's what could be, here's what we need, and here's what could drive the results, and here's what the outcome would be. And I'd assign probabilities to say those 4 options. This one's 50%, probability happening, and this one maybe 20, and then this one may be 20, and these 2 may be 5 or something, whatever, added up to 100. And we'd sit there and we'd talk to them, and then we'd pick a decision. We'd come to a conclusion. You'd say, yeah, let's go with this one, and you would implement it, and then you were constantly evaluating. We were evaluating these decisions on a monthly basis. Some companies just implement the decision and take off, and they never evaluate it. But we stayed on top of it, and if it looked like the decision wasn't going in the direction we thought it should, then we backed up and we tweaked it, and then we tried again. There are decision biases, and they talk about this in the text. It limits our ability to collect and process information. Herbert Simon, you learn from decisions that deviate from the ideal. I mean, that's his famous phrase is, you learn from those decisions that deviate from the ideal. And on, page 335, they start talking about through some of these biases. And, number 1 was anchoring and adjustment bias. Individuals react to arbitrary or irrelevant numbers when setting financial or other numerical targets. You see that in healthcare organizations where they're trying to set healthcare trend numbers. Here's where the jumping off place is at the end of the fiscal year, which is typically a calendar year. And here's where they want to be in the next calendar year. And, some of these numbers, I don't know, they base them on arbitrary and irrelevant numbers. And a lot of sales organizations, a lot of retail organizations, the same thing. They're basing their strategic decisions based on arbitrary or irrelevant numbers. You've got availability bias. Readily available information is incorrectly assessed to be also more likely. So you have to be careful with your own data. not only are you looking at your own data that your corporation has, you have to have some level of referent data. And I think we've talked about it in this class, but referent data, if healthcare, and I'm looking at average length of stay for a hospital visit, and if my average length of stay is, if I had a goal of 3.2 and mine came in at 2.1, I'm thinking, man, we've done great as far as average length of stay. But what if every other health plan in the area is coming in at like 2.2, or maybe it's coming in at 1.9 or something? Then your numbers, because you're just looking at your own numbers, you've got to have some type of a reference measure or reference metric that you can compare it to. You've got escalation of commitment to continue on a failing course of action, even after it becomes clear that this may be a poor path to follow. They talk about Vegas. You have people in there gambling. You have people playing the slot machines. They're just dumping money into it. And they continue to dump money into it and continue to follow patterns, even though it may not be the best pattern going forward. They are too hard-headed and they continue down that road. It's basically throwing good money after bad. You have a self-serving bias. When good outcomes are attributed to personal characteristics, as an example, intelligence, but undesirable outcomes are attributed to external circumstances. It's the weather, the economy. Look at these Bidenomics or whatever terminology Joe's using now. That's a self-serving bias. Student test results. Man, if you're at a class, and I've had it happen before. I've had teachers, I've had students come to me and, they'll say, well, I didn't do well on the test because you didn't know what you were doing. You were doing a very poor job of explaining the information. And because of that very poor job of explaining the information, I did poorly on the test. And I've had students also come to me and said, I don't like your test. I don't like the way you teach class, but because I'm so smart, I'm actually able to do well on the class, even in spite of you. And so, you get these outliers on students. And again, it comes back to a self-serving bias. You've got hindsight bias, and everybody's heard of hindsight's 2020. Mistakes seem obvious after they've already occurred. Think about sports. Think about the results of basketball, football, baseball games. And you're sitting at everybody in football, everybody on Monday morning wants to be an armchair quarterback because they said, well, if they had done this, they would have won the game. Or if they hadn't dropped that pass, they would have won the game. Or if they kicked that field goal, they would have won the game. Similar with Nikon. If Nikon, when they make some really nice, and still do make some nice cameras, but Nikon just didn't understand the impact of the iPhone. These mobile phones take really great pictures now. You've got also judgments about correlation and causality to make inaccurate attributions about the cause of events. When you're talking about correlation, does X increase when Y decreases? Does X increase when Y increases? Does X decrease when Y increases or decreases? That's when you're talking about correlation. You're talking about contemporal order, which comes first. So temporal order is going to tell you, you're trying to decide which comes first. You want to, you always hear people, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And that's what you run into when you're talking about temporal order. You're also ruling out other possible causes. Why did Y increase? Is there some other driver that makes Y increase? It's just not, the correlation. In economics and economists, we are known for simplifying models. It's a complex world, so we're going to simplify models to try to drive results and to try to drive understandings. We love the term ceteris paribus. It's Latin for all other things equal, all other things unchanged. You can have a two-factor model and forget about everything else. You're just varying comparing, let's say, price and quantity, supply and demand, price and quantity, and forget about everything else. Uh, that's why we're so good at our job as economists. We're the absolute best that there is, because we've got hindsight. We've got 2020 hindsight. Economists truly have 2020 hindsight. You laugh at people laugh at economists because they'll say, well, this occurred, but on the other hand, it's a good thing we have multiple hands as economists, because we're just constantly playing around with models to try to determine outcomes, to try to drive forecasts and prescriptions. And we do it by simplification, because the world is just too complex to have that perfect model that's going to drive the way things should go. And then number 7, they talk about misunderstandings about sampling bias. To draw broad conclusions from small sets of observations instead of more reliable sources of information derived from large, randomly drawn samples. And that's the important aspect, large, randomly drawn samples. Decisions based on instinct, instinct rather than analytics. So you have a lot of, I can't say a lot. You have some executives in corporations that like to go based on their gut. They like to go based on intuition. They're not so concerned with analytics, and they will draw conclusions from very small sample size, and those small sample sizes will get you into trouble, not every time, but in a lot of situations. You have overconfidence bias. To be more confident in your abilities to predict an event than logic suggests is actually possible. And that happens a lot with the executives. Success in past does not guarantee success in the future. If you've been really good at making decisions in the past as an executive, doesn't mean you're going to be successful in the future, because the market environments are changing. Economic environment is changing. Laws and regulations are changing. Supply and demand, social drivers of supply and demand are changing. You're talking about, going against hard facts. The famous saying of, and I don't know whether any of you remember Yogi Berra, but he was a catcher for the New York Yankees, and he was a manager, and Yogi is famous for his really weird sayings, but one of his famous sayings is hard to make predictions, especially about the future. Now, who's going to make a determine like that again? And it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. You've got misrepresentativeness. Managers who use stereotypes of similar occurrence when making judgments or decisions. And, you're talking about at that point unethical or illegal. You've got number 10, you've got framing. The way information is presented alters the decision an individual will make. And this is where a lot of executives get into trouble, is from framing of information. Their subordinates come to them. They don't want to be the bearer of bad news. And so rather than presenting the information in the context that it should be presented, they go through what's called poor framing. Occurs when employees are reluctant to deliver bad news, and they try to deliver it in a more positive light. That kind of glass half empty, glass half full. And I've been involved in a lot of situations where you're sitting in a meeting with, the CEO, the CFO of an organization, and, you hear, got some Yahoo that stands up and they've got this PowerPoint slide and they're talking about information, and you're sitting there thinking, what in the world are they talking about? Do they have a clue that what they are presenting is going to be a negative impact on the corporation? And so you start to And you have to be careful in those situations. But you may have to be the one that raises your hand and you say, "Are you sure this makes sense? What happens if this occurs, and how's that going to impact your results?" So poor framing is a significant issue in a lot of corporations. And then lastly, you've got satisficing. It's to settle for the first acceptable alternative instead of seeking the best possible, and in many issues, optimal decision. So that it goes through the bias. Uh, this text actually does a pretty good job when it goes through corporate, governments, social responsibility, ethical, business decision making. Uh, they do a lot better job than some of the other texts I've used, and a lot better job than some of the seminars that you go to. This winds up chapter 10. We've got a couple of more classes. I haven't decided exactly what we're going to talk about in the other classes, but I may give you a taste for some of the pioneers in the field of management, strategic planning. Mary Parker Follett, Alfred North Whitehead, Taylor. May get into some of those. We've got a couple of classes. I've got some journal articles that I may load out there. They may be somewhat dated, but they still, the concepts that they put forward, the concepts that they developed as far as management style and efficiency and production and possibilities and those things are still being used today, maybe used in a somewhat different format, but the underpinnings are still there, and the underpinnings may have been some of the drivers of the current kind of go-to when it comes to strategic planning. So we'll get another couple of classes in and then kind of wind this class up. So talk to everybody soon. Thank you.